The voice of the NBA, Mark Jones, joins me next. We're going to talk Warriors, going to get his perspective on how the team's doing as we come out of the All-Star break and begin this final push for the Golden State Warriors as they hope to accomplish great things. We'll find out if they're actually going to do so. But first up, here is Mark Jones.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And now, here is the voice of the NBA, Mark Jones. It is an absolute pleasure to have my next guest on the program. I call him the voice of the NBA alongside Mike Breen. You two really are the voice. I mean, I don't think there's anyone else that compares. You're a legend in the broadcasting industry. You've called some of the biggest games in NBA history, and now you're joining this little program. I'm thrilled and delighted. Mark Jones, you can follow him on Twitter at Mark Jones ESPN. How are you doing, sir? And your first reaction, we're near, even though the All-Star break, they call it like the midway point. In reality, it's closer to two-thirds. What are your thoughts on this Warriors team? It's been a lot of drama. It's been a lot of different narratives. How are you doing and your reaction to the Warriors, sir?
Man, doing great, first sign. You do a great job on this show, man.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Watcher and listener.
It means a lot coming from you. It means a lot.
I'm very eager to get back to the grind. I don't golf. I don't have many hobbies. I read a little bit. I pick up a good novel once in a while and I'll read it. But other than that, basketball is my life. I hang out at the gym when there's not games. I'm watching NBA players work out with their trainers in Miami at Stan Remy's gym, Ronnie Taylor's gym, out in Los Angeles at different spots. So that basketball is my life. I have no other life. So I'm ready to get back to work. As for the first 2/3 of the season, you're right. People have this misconception. It's the halfway point. It's the short part of the race that's remaining now. And when I think about Golden State's journey so far, it feels like 3 seasons for them already.
Yes.
With all the different machinations that have happened and the way they've reinvented themselves and the different peaks and valleys and, the great showings and shooting displays by Steph and Draymond's suspension. And it feels like, just like I said, the content, 3 seasons worth of content and happenings already. But I'm never going to count out a dynastic franchise like Golden State. Right now, sitting, 10th right now on the edge of the play-in tournament. Lakers at 9th, a perilous position, but trending in the right direction. And I like the way that any other coach, I think, would be in trouble right now or would have pressed the panic button. But I'm a firm believer in Steve Kerr and the buttons that he's able to press and the relationship building that he does within the team during the course of the season, dealing with tragedy, with Decky's passing. A lot has gone on. There have been a lot of heavy moments with this team, but with 2/3 of the season remaining, I still think there's a realistic possibility for them to make a big push and end up, in that top 6 somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm hearing a lot of people make comparisons to that 2022 team. An obvious difference is they started 18-2 and they kind of coasted. This version's team started off not so great, and then now the hope is they have a finish similar to that same year, 2022, only with the Celtics instead of the Warriors, because they had a strong finish as well. Right. What I'm seeing in what I'm seeing between that season and this season, though, in terms of a huge difference, is not the Warriors themselves. I mean, there are differences there, but the NBA landscape between then and now, I feel like, has gotten a lot bigger. The Warriors, I think, lucked out in a lot of ways. You look at the 2 conference finals that season, for example, where The bigs you had to contend with were Robert Williams of the Celtics, Bam Adebayo. The Mavericks never really had any, traditional bigs that the Warriors had to contend with. So they didn't have to deal with size. And the game has changed a lot in just these 2 years. Do you think that will be an impediment for the Warriors? Or do you think that's something that they can still overcome despite the size issues?
Man, that's a great point, because that's my biggest question about them. And I know that Coach Kerr never likes acquiring or having size just for size sake.
Yes.
But size that are opponents, some of the imposing opponents of the Warriors right now, of course, the reigning champs, the Warriors, with Joker, the two-time MVP. You look at even OKC with Chet, a big with varied skills.
Right.
He can stretch the floor. He can play closer to the basket, rebound, block shot.
And just sorry to interrupt, but Chet hit that game winner against the Warriors.
Yeah.
They couldn't block it, right? Because he was so tall.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, say what you want about Anthony Davis and some of his injury history. He's still when he's healthy and quote unquote right, he's a top 5 player in this league. And he's still capable of having games like that. So, yeah, I think the Warriors were ahead of the curve. Mm-hmm. And you point out, might have, in terms of the evolution of the game, were on the front side of it. The rest of the league has caught up and now has the size to go along with the style component. When I look at some of the concerns of Golden State, I love the fact that with Podziemski in the starting lineup, he's a good rebounder. But when it comes to actually playing half-court defense, you're still small. Still have Draymond at the 5. And he's had moments against guys like Joker. There was that one memorable steal that he had against Denver in, I think it was the conference finals 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, when he had the little wraparound knockaway move in a pivotal point of the game. But that's still asking a lot for a guy 6'6" to defend, a two-time MVP with that kind of size, who leads the NBA in post-up touches and I think post-up points, if he's not only second to Embiid at that. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they work around that. And I'm not sure how they can combat that, whether it's with pace, whether it's more three-point shooting volume, some kind of collaborative, which right now I'm not sure how to imagine it.
Yeah, it's tough to imagine. You're absolutely right. And what are your thoughts on Draymond this year? I mean, you talk about, again, covering this team. It's been exhausting this year, Mark. I'm not going to lie, just because there's so much. You have to be sensitive to a lot of what you discuss as well. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on the Draymond situation? I mean, it was a rough start. I feel like one of the benefits to him missing so much time early on is that you're not worried as much about him wearing down playing those center minutes against bigger players, but. I'd love your opinion on Draymond Green this season as a whole.
I think him missing that time where he was suspended brought urgency to Kuminga's ascension.
Yeah.
I think that's the main takeaway from it all for me, is that, after that second loss to Denver, when they tricked off that 18-point lead, I think it was, late in the game, and Kuminga goes into Kerr's office and they have that, coming to Jesus moment and talk about what's happening moving forward. And the fruition of that is this wonderful flourishing of Kuminga to where he is right now, as he emerges the third leading scorer on that team and a viable option offensively, where Kerr is trusting him. And I think that was one of the great things to come out of it. And now Draymond comes back, you plug him in at the 5, and they've essentially reinvented themselves. So I think their upside is still yet to be totally realized with Kuminga as this version of himself, and, running their split actions with Draymond as the hub. Steph is always going to be Steph. Clay is going to be Clay, now coming off the bench, which gives Kerr, I think, a different innovative mindset to do different things off the bench with how he substitutes Dre with either the first or second unit and Clay on that second unit.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of intrigue moving forward, and I'm not going to sign off on, I'm not even going to look at any kind of death certificate on this dynastic franchise, because I think there's a lot to be discovered still with some of the pieces that Steve Kerr has. He's a Hall of Fame coach, and I think there's a lot of things he can still do. And as long as Steph is healthy, the ceiling is still pretty high for them.
Absolutely. It's incredible watching Steph still at the peak of his powers. All right, let's give some love to our first sponsor of the day, and that's PrizePicks. One of my favorite sponsors. They're all favorites, but PrizePicks, I have a lot of fun using their application for the simple reason that besides the fact it's legal in California, I mean, that alone, if you live in our great Golden State, you are aware that certain sports gambling sites are not legal. But when it comes to daily fantasy sports, it is. And so you could have a ton of fun betting on individuals and whether or not they're going to, let's say, score more or less than a certain amount. They might be grabbing more or less than a certain amount of rebounds. Maybe you want to bet on a certain number of assists that a player has dished out. That's what it's all about. Individual accomplishments and whether or not these individuals accomplish the barometer set by PrizePicks. And it's super fun. Minimum of 2 players you got to select, maximum of 6 players. If you get all 6 right, you can win up to 25 times what you put in. And plus, it's demon time on PrizePicks, where you can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks, where you can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and goblins are the newest, the most exciting way to play at PrizePicks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Go have fun and thank me later.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dawn has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And you can also follow Mark Jones on Twitter at Mark Jones ESPN. Here is the voice of the NBA. You talk about the youngsters. I've been advocating for Jonathan Kuminga. There's a reason why he was as widely positively regarded as he was, entering one of the deepest drafts in NBA history. And we're finally seeing him getting the opportunity. He's shining. One thing that I'm curious to get your take on is, who do you compare him to? I have no idea what his ceiling is yet. It's infinite at this point, but is there a comp? I have a hard time comparing him to anyone in NBA history. He might just be unique and a standalone. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think at this point, the handle isn't quite there, but there might be a little bit of Paul George in his game if he continues to trend in that direction. So I watched Jonathan work out in the summer here. He was down in Miami for a good bit of time and watched him in some 5-on-5 pickup games. And I've seen parts of his games that I didn't know he had.
Right.
I didn't. You see different sides of guys when there's not a coach calling out plays on the sidelines, whether it's thumb up or thumb down or whatever. And he showed me some things, and whether it be with handle or shot making, play making, passing, he's got a lot of junk in the trunk. So
yes, he does.
I think that might be a little bit of a comp for him. Like I said, very raw still, but man, as in terms of how he fits in Golden State's offensive system, I imagine him now when they throw it into him in the post or mid post as the guy on those split cuts, he can do it himself. Or if he's one of the other guys, one of the cutters, one to the ball, one to the rim on those split cuts, he can be a dynamic diver and do some great things. So there's still there's a steep ascension for him on that learning curve.
Yes, there is.
And, Paul George is, I think, maybe the top end for him. And, you look at his last few games, he shot the 3-ball extremely well, too. So that's not really that much of a stretch.
Correct. And he actually shot the 3-ball nearly 38% last year. He had I feel like the whole team had a slow start, except for Steph in terms of shooting this year. But you're right. That number is coming up. And I'm glad you saw him. He did like a 3-city tour last summer, working out. Miami was one of those cities. Is that where you're at right now?
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I picked up a shade of tan. That's the great thing about All-Star break. I love going to that first practice and seeing guys where you can tell where they were by how much whether they're using SPF 6, 10, or 15. I saw a bunch of guys pass through here too. It was kind of fun.
Absolutely. But real quick, just going back to Kuminga, just to add on to what you said, he's ambidextrous. Like his left is as good as his right. That was one of the first things that stuck out to me, because if you don't have a weakness in either direction, that makes life so much more difficult for opposing defenders. He's got touch on his shot, which I don't think people mention enough. He's got a great feel for the game. I'm super excited about this kid. Have you had a chance to study the other youngsters? There are two that a lot of the fan base, myself included, are a little disgruntled over the fact that they're not getting enough reps or time. I'm referring more specifically to Moses Moody and Trace Jackson Davis. I think these two kids could play. What are your thoughts, sir?
Boy, I saw both. I saw Trace Jackson Davis in Summer League with Pajemski. And it's funny because I thought Jackson Davis actually had a little bit more, had more moments of temporary brilliance than Pajemski did. I thought Pajemski really struggled in Summer League. I actually called a couple of Golden State games. I was like, okay, well, you know what? It's just Summer League, and sometimes it's the context and the players are playing with. And, Quinoniz was obviously, I thought, the best player on the Summer League roster. But, Jackson Davis has given them great moments, I thought, of utility this year, but still a little bit undersized at that position. I think as a rebounder, as a shot blocker, he can give them 8 to 10 minutes in a best case scenario. But Steve Kerr, you've really got to, I like to say, he's got to be able to trust you like 2-ply toilet paper, man. Like that's real trust, right?
Right.
He got to really be able to trust you. And that takes a while to build. And, Pajemski at the other end of the spectrum has proven that he's earned Steve's trust through his ability to be a connector out there, to rebound, to defend, to make timely buckets, to show a little bit of maturity beyond his years. So as for Moody, I'm not sure why he's playing. I'll be honest with you, why he's not playing more. I just don't know. I'll be honest with you. He's proven in the past that he's been a good fit. He's shown that, he has flow within what Golden State likes to do and hasn't forced it and is fit, but I couldn't tell you why he's not the guy right now.
Yeah, it's a mystery, and I feel for this kid, but this is also a very deep team, as I'm sure you're aware of as well. What in your opinion, who are the legitimate contenders? Like, who are you feeling? Let's go big picture here now, NBA. Who are the favorites in your opinion? Like, who are you feeling the best about in terms of world championship contender status?
Yeah, I would probably go Boston, Milwaukee. I'll go chalk in the East. Boston, Milwaukee with, probably as my wild card pick out of the East, Miami. In the Western Conference, I think what Minnesota has done this year has withstood the test of time. They've been in first place longer than any time in their franchise history, and they built it at the defensive end. And they're a team I still feel that is evolving, especially offensively. Defensively ranked number 1 in defensive rating, offensively more around the middle of the pack, around 13, 14. I actually have their game on Friday on ESPN against Milwaukee, so I get another close look at them. But, they've got a legit star in Anthony Edwards. And, people forget last year against Denver. I'm not going to discount what Denver did. They earned their championship.
Absolutely.
They deserved their championship. But Minnesota was missing McDaniels on the wing. They were missing Naz Reid, another long stretch shooter who can defend. Yeah. They got control, right?
Yeah.
They were missing some pieces, and Cat was just coming back from his injury, his calf injury. So they're whole this year, and they're scary. I think if you're looking at the Western Conference, they're probably my top pick to come out. I still think one of those play-in teams, either the Lakers or Golden State, is capable of making a run. OKC has a lot of youth, and young teams sometimes have to gather some scars before they make it out of the playoffs into the second or third round conference finals. SGA is a guy that can carry his team, but the playoffs are always a little bit different. This is going to be Chet's first time around, and J-Dub, Jalen Williams is talented, but they're the second youngest team in the NBA, and I have a hard time imagining it before I see it.
Absolutely.
So those are my picks, yeah. And of course, hey, listen, you have to throw in the reigning champs too.
Of course, absolutely. And for those listening to the podcast, I did a punching gesture because of McDaniels punching a wall in frustration last year, broke, I believe, his hand, and he missed an important series because of that. But it's it's maturation. You learn, you live and learn, like we all do.
Yeah.
All right, let's give some love to our next sponsor for the evening, and that is BetterHelp. Tonight's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA and get on your way to being your best self. Look, there is one of the really positive things in today's world is the fact that the stigma associated with getting mental help is largely eliminated. I like with anything, there's still outliers, but the good news is you hopefully should not feel in any way negative about seeking help for the most important organ in your body, your brain. And this is a crazy world. It's okay if you sometimes feel anxious. You might feel depressed. You might just feel overwhelmed with everything going on. Never mind, you got an election coming up. You got global conflicts. Maybe it's your personal life, whatever it is that is not just maybe not making you feel right, making you feel anxious about things. Therapy has been a lifesaver for me, and BetterHelp is a resource for you that is also super easy on top of just being a very valuable source of help for you potentially. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, and especially therapy that will save you time and money in terms of not having to drive to an office to speak to a therapist, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. For the everydayers, following this episode, I'm finally going to be recording and uploading my Jonathan Kuminga piece. This is going to be an episode dedicated solely to the young up-and-coming star who's going to be a superstar someday. And I'm going to talk about his background. I'm going to share with you who he is. Where is he from? What's his family like? Surprisingly to me, given he's been with the team nearly 3 years, there's been very little written about Jonathan Kuminga. So I've done my research, and I want to share with you who this young, fascinating individual is. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, we got more with the voice of the NBA, ESPN's Mark Jones, who you can follow on Twitter at MarkJonesESPN. NBA Today, I believe that's the show, the daily show on ESPN that covers the NBA with Malik Andrews. They had an interesting discussion today, and I want to end the show on this note, just because I thought it was a little fascinating. They had a debate about the Warriors back in 2017. This was the following their 73-win season. They fall just short in the NBA Finals, and then they end up getting Kevin Durant,
Right.
and the rest is history. But the debate was about whether or not the Warriors would have won the title in 2017 if Kevin Durant did not come. It likely would have resulted in Harrison Barnes re-signing with the Warriors,
Right.
and you would have just seen the same team run it back, maybe with a few different pieces. But on one side, there was an emphatic argument that LeBron's Cavaliers would have easily won the title. The other side was the Warriors would have made up for their shortfall the year before, and they would have won. What are your thoughts on that? Like, will the Warriors?
That's a fascinating what if. That is a fascinating, mind-blowing what if. I mean, like, you keep Harrison Barnes, he re-signs as a free agent, or they keep him, whatever the deal was contractually. I'd have to say that 73-9 doesn't lie, man.
No,
that doesn't lie. I mean, it took everything. It took a wild set of circumstances. Remember now, for the Cavs to come back from down 3-1 with the Draymond suspension.
Correct.
If you force me to answer that, I'm going to say that Golden State wins it, even though LeBron is going to make it a 7-game series without KD on the Golden State Warriors. I would say that team was still very much an indomitable machine. And with the pieces that they bring back, the experience from losing that 3-1 lead to the Cavaliers and LeBron, as much respect as I have for King James and, the stats that he put up against Golden State in all of those finals. I mean, those were incredible, mind-blowing stats.
Yes, they were.
I just think that the Warriors were a little bit deeper and a little bit better. Just a little bit.
And
we'll
they
never
still
know.
had that hunger, right, to come back after losing. Yeah. It was just a fascinating what if when it was presented. What are you reading, by the way? I'm a fan of literature myself. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I cut you off?
I never thought about that. That's a great what if.
Yeah.
Because I would have never imagined that the Cavaliers would come back from that 3-1 lead. But all things being equal, I'd have to go Golden State. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you reading these days? I'm a fan of literature. I think it's if you want to exercise your brain, the most important organ in your body, it's not a muscle, but you can still work it out. You read.
Yeah.
What's on your plate these days? What are you reading?
I think it's the title of the book is Electric Mermaid by Tim Dorsey. Tim Dorsey, he just passed away in November, so I was sad to find that out. But he's one of my favorite authors. He writes about certain historical aspects of Florida, which my wife and I and family still consider home as well. Some of the zaniness and craziness, but it's mixed in with kind of murder mystery and some of the bizarre stuff that happens on a daily basis down here. Like one of the scenes of his prior books that I read opened up with police investigating a headless man found in a topless bar.
The most famous headline, arguably ever.
Yeah, that's Florida, right?
Yeah.
But you learn some really good history along the way, and he talks about the railroads being built here with Flagler and the Florida Keys and their kind of ecosystem and personality, which is totally different from mainland Florida.
Yeah.
And, reading books is a great way to kind of flush your mind and learn new words too, which I'm
absolutely. It increases your vocabulary. You're forcing your brain to actually conjure up these imaginary worlds. I mean, it's you're working this thing, and I respect that you still a lot. The written word is I worry about it sometimes. I'm with you, son. I'm with you. We live in a Twitter universe where people don't really read anymore, and there's a contraction of general overall intelligence. I feel absolutely.
It's kind of sad, but that's the world we're in.
Yeah, and it's just and sorry to go off talking about a totally different subject, but I feel like the business model for the media has survived with video and audio, like podcasts make money. Whether it's TV, even though it's having its struggles itself, you could still make money advertising. Obviously, the YouTube format makes money, but they haven't really figured it out with print. And I hope they do figure it out soon, because to follow up what you said, yeah, we are experiencing an intellectual decline. And I think part of that is people not reading as much. But
yeah, I used to love reading, Lee Jenkins and Sports Illustrated, and taking my Sports Illustrated, having a paper copy of it on the plane and reading it from life.
Yes, sir.
And, they would always, the articles were always well written, and when I came across a word I wasn't sure about, I would, highlight it with my highlighter and look it up. And my grandfather was an English professor. My dad was fluent in Latin and Spanish, and the language means so much to me. And I talk about the pulchritudinous flick of the wrist by Steph Curry, and it's just beauty. It's a way of saying beautiful instead of just saying good or great. It's pulchritude. It's comely. It's like we should be using bold descriptions in our world, because we're professional journalists. Otherwise you get a 6-year-old to say good and bad, and what are we doing, right?
Absolutely. You're notorious for the expressions and your verbiage. Do you script those ever? Is it spontaneous?
It's who I am. It's the way my mind works. I love it. Stuff that I grew up, part of my mom and dad and our culture, and spitting things out around the dinner table. So I sometimes like to bring them to the basketball broadcast, and when appropriate, when it applies, I throw it out there, and that's just me. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't, but you just keep going.
Oh, it's incredible. I think everyone I speak universally in saying it's fantastic. Anything you'd like to promote before we go? Your daughter Sophia, I know, is playing for San Jose State, my former student. I love her contributions. We hope to get her back on the show soon. But for anything you would like to promote, sir, please.
Well, we have ESPN. We have a nice event coming up Friday night. I'm doing the broadcast of the game between Milwaukee, who's at Minnesota, and Minneapolis at the Target Center this Friday on ESPN, and it's part of an all-access day we have that day. Stephen A. Smith is going to be fronting the piece, and we're going to go into the bowels of Target Center and preparation leading up to the game by the Minnesota Timberwolves. It'll take you, give you a nice kind of look from the inside out at what happens on game day with an NBA basketball team. So we're looking forward to that, and I'm calling the game that night with Richard Jefferson, and should be fun.
A side note, I love Richard Jefferson. I think that's an
one-time Warrior, right?
You're correct, yeah. But he's just a witty guy. He's funny. I think it's a great addition to your network, in my humble opinion. And again, folks can watch you covering the NBA. They could follow you on Twitter at Mark Jones ESPN. Mark, a pleasure, sir. Thank you as always for coming on.
You do great work, Cy. And the other thing I should mention, I'm doing the Sacramento Kings game Monday night against the Miami Heat as we get underway in the second half of the season too. So
there you go.
Looking forward to doing a Sunday night as well on ESPN after my Friday night game. Sunday night, I get the Warriors at home against the Denver Nuggets with Stephanie White, and then driving up Interstate 80, hopefully no traffic, and doing the Kings and Heat on Monday night. So looking forward to a great weekend.
Oh, and you are a hardworking man, sir, because like you just said, I don't think enough people are aware of this. You are the voice of the Sacramento Kings as well. And that's a whole other story. If we were a Kings broadcast, oh man, there's a
free gear that comes with that.
I love it. Mark Jones, thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.